Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on something that's, well, honestly, it's incredibly ambitious, but it's just absolutely fascinating. We are going to take a massive, frankly chaotic, global list of 50 mythical sea creatures, drawn from ancient lore and modern folklore all over the world, and we're going to transform the whole shebang into a structured, biological taxonomy. Now, you might be wondering, why do that? Because by categorizing these terrifying beasts, we're actually going to uncover the deep-seated psychology behind human fear. We're going to see exactly how our ancestors made sense of the unknown. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. Throughout human history, our ancestors stood at the very edges of oceans, lakes, and rivers, staring out into those dark, unexplored voids of water, and they asked themselves one question: what truly lurks beneath the waves? And because human beings are incredibly creative, we didn't just leave that void empty. No way. We filled it with monsters. We gave our deepest anxieties teeth, tentacles, and scales, basically inventing these horrifying creatures to make the terrifying randomness of the water feel, just a little more tangible.
So to really make sense of this, we're going on a bit of a narrative journey to understand these archetypes, rather than just reading off a monotonous encyclopedia of 50 names. We'll break it down into 5 categories: fear of the deep, titans that end worlds, deadly shapeshifters and deceivers, cautionary tales and cryptids, and finally, why we invent monsters.
Section 1. Fear of the Deep. Ocean Anxieties.
This right here is the foundational anxiety that birthed literally all of these legends. I mean, the sheer, overwhelming scale and the absolute deadliness of the ocean practically forced ancient cultures across the globe to invent faces for their fears. They desperately needed a way to explain why sailors never came home, or why a sudden storm could just wipe out an entire fleet. From the epic poems of Greek horrors to the freezing, isolated ice of Inuit legends, we have extracted precisely 50 legendary sea beasts for this analysis, and grouping them together makes it overwhelmingly clear just how universal the fear of water really is. It totally doesn't matter if you lived thousands of years ago in the Mediterranean or a few hundred years ago up in the Arctic, the deep water terrified you.
Section 2. Titans that end worlds. Apocalyptic monsters.
We aren't talking about creatures that just snatch a stray fisherman anymore. No, we are scaling way up to apocalyptic monsters whose sheer size and power represent unimaginable global doom. Think about how different cultures conceptualize the apocalypse through these 3 titans. First up, from Norse mythology, we've got Jormungandr, the world serpent. This creature is so impossibly huge that it stretches all the way around the earth, literally grasping its own tail. The myth states that if it ever lets go, the oceans will completely flood the earth, bringing about Ragnarok, where it's destined to fight the god Thor. Then you have the biblical Leviathan. This is a beast described as being over 300 miles long. It breathes actual fire and boasts completely impenetrable scales. It's an entity of such magnitude that the texts claim only God himself can defeat it at the end of time. Finally, fast-forwarding to the 20th century, we have H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. This cosmic entity with an octopus head and a scaly, rubbery body sits imprisoned in a sunken city. But what makes Cthulhu so uniquely terrifying is that its mere existence radiates this intense, subconscious anxiety right into human minds. These massive beasts aren't just big animals. They symbolize the absolutely unstoppable, chaotic forces of nature that can wipe out humanity in an instant.
And this brilliantly illustrates how myths scale danger to the exact size of human ambition. Basically, as we built bigger ships, the monsters got bigger too. Just consider the Scandinavian Kraken, a humongous squid-like beast specifically known for dragging entire massive ships down into the dark depths. Now compare that to the Greek sea pass guardians, Scylla and Charybdis. Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. Scylla is this horrifying hag with 6 dog heads on necks that stretch over 100 feet, while her counterpart, Charybdis, is a cursed, grotesque sea monster that drinks so much seawater she creates a massive, ship-swallowing whirlpool. It was an impossible survival choice for ancient sailors, and it perfectly personified the very real, inescapable geographical hazards of navigating narrow ocean straits.
Section 3. Deadly Shapeshifters, Tricksters, and Deceivers.
Let's scale down the terror for a minute, from literal world enders to something far more intimate and psychological. These aren't monsters that overpower you with their size. They are psychological tricksters. They specifically disguise themselves to lure humans into a watery grave through seduction, trickery, or misplaced trust. Let's do a rapid fire through these seducers. The Celtic Selkie sheds its seal skin to become a human, but if a human hides that skin, she's tragically forced into marriage, bound to the land until she finds it again.
Also from Celtic lore is the Kelpie, appearing as a black horse offering rides to children or shifting into a handsome man to lure young women. Down in the Amazon, you have the Encantado, a river dolphin that shifts into a seductive man, but if you make eye contact, bam, you're cursed with a lifetime of terrible nightmares. And in Slavic mythology, there are the Rusalkas. These are vengeful, undead women who haunt the rivers where they drowned, using their beauty to drag men down to their deaths. What's absolutely brilliant here is the inclusion of specific tells in the folklore. A transformed Kelpie can be identified by the water weeds tangled in his hair. A Rusalka must keep at least 1 foot submerged in the water at all times. These small, vivid details served as practical survival clues for the wary locals, basically a mythical checklist to keep you safe. Of course, the most famous of these deceivers are the Greek sirens, right? Their bewitching songs caused an illusion to fall over sailors' minds, forcing them to literally jump overboard to become a meal. But the ancients didn't just invent the monsters, they invented the cheat codes to beat them. So how do you survive a siren? Step 1 is the Odysseus method. Simply plug your crew's ears with beeswax so they literally can't hear the danger. Or, if you're feeling a bit more competitive, you go with Step 2, the Orpheus method. Bring along a legendary musician to play music so incredibly mesmerizing that it completely drowns out the siren song. It's just amazing how these myths functioned as literal step-by-step survival guides.
Section 4. Cautionary Tales, Local Cryptids.
Now we're moving the narrative away from grand, sweeping mythology and getting into the bizarre, highly specific local monsters. These creatures often served as incredibly practical safety warnings to keep communities, and especially kids, out of harm's way. But to really understand this, we need to quickly define a crucial term from Japanese folklore to ground us: yokai. Yokai are a class of supernatural entities and spirits in Japanese culture. They aren't all necessarily evil. They're wildly imaginative, often deeply tied to very specific natural phenomena, and they inhabit local waters in ways that are both terrifying and, honestly, kind of absurd.
Take one of the most famous water yokai, the kappa. This is a creature about the size of a child, but it's got frog legs, a turtle shell, and this weird little curved dish on top of its skull that holds magical, strength-giving water. If you encounter one, it might challenge you to a sumo match. If you lose, it will literally rip your bowels out from your anus. Yes, you heard that right, it's gruesome. So how do you survive? It's actually brilliantly simple. Step 1, accept the sumo challenge. Step 2, bow deeply. Because the kappa is the most honorable of all yokai, it's socially obligated to bow back to you. When it does, that magical water spills right out of its head dish, rendering it completely weak and powerless. Your bowels remain totally safe, and the kappa might even grant you great knowledge for besting it.
The tonal shifts in this local folklore are just wild. On the one hand, you have incredibly practical cautionary figures like the Inuit Kalupalik. She's a humanoid creature wearing a parka who lives under the ice. If children wander out onto dangerous, thin ice, she breaks through, stuffs them into her oversized hood, and drowns them. I mean, it's terrifying, sure, but what a highly effective way to keep your kids away from a real-world hazard. In British swamps, the green, scaly Grindalo served the exact same purpose. But then you have the darkly hilarious Sezioni from Japan. Legend says when a turbaned snail turns 30, it becomes a giant shape-shifting mollusk. In one famous tale, it disguised itself as a drowning woman, was saved by pirates, slept with all of them, and then stole their testicles to ransom back to them for gold. You can't make this stuff up. Or take the Umibōzu, a 100-foot shadow priest that demands a barrel from sailors just so it can drown the crew in it. The ingenious practical solution? Just hand it a barrel with no bottom. Problem solved.
And hey, if you think these hyperlocal sea monsters are purely a thing of the ancient past, let's look at modern-day cryptids. The ancient sea monster archetype easily survives today in local folklore all around the world. In Scotland, you obviously have Nessie, described as a dinosaur-like creature with a long neck. Over in the US, Lake Champlain boasts Champ, a 25-foot reptilian beast with a horse head that's reportedly been sighted over 300 times. In Canada, the Ogopogo of Okanagan Lake supposedly demands native sacrifices and whips its tail to create deadly whirlpools. And down in the Bahamas, locals warn of the Lusca, a horrifying 250-foot great white shark and octopus hybrid that guards blue holes and supposedly moves as fast as a jet ski. Human nature hasn't changed at all. We still absolutely love projecting monsters into dark waters.
Section 5. Why we invent monsters, understanding fear.
By looking at all 50 of these creatures, a very clear, synthesized picture emerges about exactly why these mythological beasts were so utterly vital to early human societies. So the crucial point is this: These terrifying stories weren't just campfire tales meant for cheap scares. They were highly sophisticated cultural tools. On one side, you have the practical, everyday survival tools, like the Kalupalik, whose terrifying narrative specifically enforced physical caution to keep children away from deadly thin ice. On the macro side, you have the grand reflections of fear, like the Leviathan or the Kraken. These serve to explain the untamable raw power of the ocean to societies that were completely at the mercy of the weather and tides. They enforced a deep, necessary cultural respect for dangerous waters.
And you can really see how this builds into what I like to call the ultimate monster mashups. Because the sea was so unknown, human imagination brilliantly took the things we already feared on land and just combined them with the unpredictable mysteries of the sea. Look at the Japanese Ushioni. It has the head of an ox, the body of a spider, and it leaps onto ships to spit poison. Or the Inuit Aklet, a terrifying, aggressive hybrid that is half wolf and half killer whale. Or the Finnish Iku Turso, a half-walrus, half-octopus creature that is supposedly the father of 9 terrible diseases. We essentially took the fangs, the poison, and the claws of the terrestrial world, and we grafted them right onto the dark depths of the aquatic world.
We've built a taxonomy out of 50 incredible myths today, tracing human psychology, fear, and survival right through the ages. But I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Even today, with all our advanced technology, our satellites, and our deep-sea submarines, roughly 80% of our real-world oceans remain completely unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored. We have quite literally barely scratched the surface. So the next time you look out at that dark, rolling water, are we absolutely sure they're all just myths? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope it sparked your curiosity, and I will see you next time as we dive into another fascinating topic.